Hi, this is Justin Slocum with the Pipeline, and I wanted to welcome Jens Nielsen here today to talk about his business and business coaching. Jens Nielsen, thank you for coming out. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. I'm excited to have our conversation. I know we've been trying to link up for a little bit. Try to condense that into a short bio here. But as people may notice, I have a little bit of an accent, and my name is not the most common American name here, right? So I was born and raised in Denmark. Came to the United States 30 years ago, actually.
Nice.
Via London, England. I lived there for a little while, and then I moved to the East Coast. I lived in Maryland for the first 10 years of my life in the US and did the typical thing, right? Went and got my education, my undergrad, my graduate degree, and then went on to work in telecommunication and IT for 25 plus years. Moved around the country and started in Maryland, and then 20 years ago, we actually moved out to the Southwest, first to Albuquerque, New Mexico, then to Durango, Colorado, and now we're in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So that's the geographical moves I've made, but working for different corporations, anything from startups to local government to large corporation to Native American tribes, right? So tried quite a few different things throughout my career. But then roughly 10 years ago, I decided that, in my mid 40s, I decided that something had to change, right? I didn't want to work for somebody else for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
And as I was looking around, everything looked like another job until I kind of, stumbled on real estate, if you will. So 10 years ago, I started investing in real estate, first in my own account, meaning with my own capital, then moving on to joint ventures, to syndications, and so on. And that has been
That's exciting.
apartments and warehouses and everything else. Right, quit my job over 5 years ago and run, a full-time investing slash coaching and consulting business as well. So
Wow.
that's
So
very
that's where
brief,
you that's where
we can
you've
dig
been for
into
the
anything
last
you
5
want.
years. That's amazing. That's great. That's awesome. Can you share a little bit about the name of your business and your role in it and where you are currently?
Yes, I mean, my real estate business is called Open Doors with an S
Okay.
capital. There's another company out there that has a similar name. Don't get me confused. It's really, I'm the founder and principal of my piece of the company, but I've partnered with different people on different deals, what made sense, right? So, I don't have any employees. It's just me, but I have many partners in various deals. And that's how we're able to take down over 2,000, I think close to 2,500 units in the last 10 years in various
That's
places and so.
awesome. Wow. So, basically that, 2,500 units, that's got to be a lot of property management going on there.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things to understand for anybody listening, right? Just because you're buying properties, it doesn't mean that you have to manage them, right? I
Okay.
tried self-management and oh my God, I hate it. That's not something
Okay.
that I want to spend my effort in. So we, early on decided that we wanted to be investors. We wanted to be investors, not owner operators. So we always have had property management on every single property. Well, except for a brief period of trying to self-manage, we always have property management on, and that's just the only way you can grow and scale.
Nice. So, your role in the business is basically pulling the investors together to do these projects and, basically take down this larger multi-unit, I guess. Is that mainly your sector is multi-unit?
Yeah, so we started in 10 years ago, right? We started in multifamily. I know a lot of people, they start by buying a single family house or something small, but I decided early on that single family houses didn't make sense for us. So we went straight to multifamily, right? So the first properties we bought in the first year were fourplexes, 4 units down in Albuquerque. Because I couldn't do anything where I was living at that time in Colorado, we decided, hey, we're going to move, we're going to invest in a different state. We're going to be investors because I didn't want another job. I was working at that time. I didn't want another
Yeah.
job. So I wanted to put my money to work for me and create passive cash flow. So that was the initial thing, right? We never did single family homes. For a brief moment, for a couple of years, year and a half, 2 years, we owned a small mobile home park in Colorado, which was,
Wow.
interesting to try, but not really my cup of tea. So we sold that. So, and then we started scaling, right? So we went from stuff we could buy in our own account to some joint ventures where we got a few partners together to larger syndications where we raised money from a lot of different investors. And that's basically what the model has been. Now, I get it, wherever you want to go with the conversation, but then as the multifamily market has shifted a little bit in the last few years, we've been more focused on industrial properties, meaning warehouses and flex space and stuff like that, because there was some new interest in that space that made it more lucrative to invest in recently.
Yeah, there's a lot of data centers going up around Richmond, Virginia, where I'm home based right now. So the current state you're seeing is kind of trending a little bit towards these flex spaces, warehouses, and industrial buildings, I guess, if you will.
That's what we have seen, right? So, for those who have been following the apartment market for the last 5 years, I don't know how many, some have, some haven't, right? But, interest rates were really low in during the pandemic in 21, and then they really started rising in 22 and 23,
Yeah,
causing really a huge challenge in making these deals work from an underwriting standpoint, right? Because if you had been used to paying 3 or 4% and suddenly it was 6 and 7%,
that's a lot.
plus inflation caused everything to get more expensive.
I
Plus
know.
labor was, so hard, and insurance, everything's, we're like, oh my God, this stuff, they don't underwrite anymore. I mean, we would have to, either pay so much less for them or have these crazy projections of rent increases. Neither we were comfortable with. Well, I mean, we couldn't dictate the sales price, right? That was the sellers. And the sellers were still sitting on this inflated expectations of 21 and 22. And so they weren't willing to sell, right? So suddenly there was a huge gap between buyers and sellers, which we couldn't close. So we're like, well, do we sit on our hands and don't buy any deals, or do we try a new approach? And at that point, the industrial space started to make sense. Now, I'm not talking about, 1,000 square foot Amazon or, a huge data center, stuff like that. That is,
Okay.
institutional money here. We're talking millions or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to build these things, right? No, we're talking Class C infill or warehouses in small industrial parks in the city. So if you're a plumber or a granite guy or a muffler shop, you have your little business where your customers are. So that has actually worked quite well. We've done
Yeah.
3 of these deals in the last couple of years.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. That's kind of something I'm real familiar with, and that's pretty clever. So that's pretty interesting to see that trend that you're kind of keeping your eyes on. That's really cool. When you talk about these investments, if I was an investor, Jens, and I was looking to get in on one of these deals, how would you find me, and what would that look like for me? As a layman, say if I'm like, hey, I'm tired of doing single family home, property investing, and I want to get in on something that's a little more, like you said, passive, where I'm not going to have to, because I do have a few single family homes that I, did, that I rent and maybe I'm getting tired with that. What do I do? And how does this deal work out? And, where's the profit for you? I mean, percentage wise, I mean, where does that fit in? And, basically, how do I make the money and how do you make the money is really
Yeah.
what I'm interested in.
So let's unpack that question a little bit. So the first one is like, how do you find, if you're an LP, a limited partner who wants to invest passively, how do you find people like myself and you and other people who are out there syndicating these deals, right? And it's not a very efficient market in the sense that you can't just, go on the stock market and buy shares, right? You can do that in the REIT, but in what we do, it is a lot more about not creating, but finding investors, right? So I do a lot of work in talking to people. I run a meetup. I, have my newsletters. I go on podcasts. I post generic things on social media so that I get the word out there about what I'm doing. And then I slowly build an investor base out of people. Typically it's, quote unquote, for friends and family. And then over time you get referrals and more people get to know about you and you grow that, right? So as a GP, as the person putting the deal together, you got to do work. You got to put the stuff out there. Like you have your podcast, right? I have had meetups and I've been on a lot of podcasts as a guest. So that's one way you get
Yeah,
known. And if you're an LP, if you want to be the passive investor, you got to listen to podcasts. You got to probably go to conferences. You got to
sure.
ask around, right? Because it's not like we have a sign on the side of the street saying, come invest with us. Bringing those together is not very efficient
It's a
because there's also all
partnership.
kinds of rules about advertising and stuff like that, right? So it's not very efficient. But the cool thing is also, right, if I need to raise $1 million, I don't need 1,000 investors. I need, 10 investors or 15 investors that can each put 50 or 100K in. So you don't need a
Sure.
million investors. You need build very good relationships, right? So that I
And
focus a lot on building those.
what kind of percentage of return on investment would I get if I put $100,000 in with a deal? What would that look like for a guy like me? And what does it look like for you as a general partner? I mean, as far as your annual, I don't know whether you're in the 1 million or 10 million as far as annual revenue goes for 2,500 units. I would imagine there's quite a bit of, it's pretty lucrative, I would imagine. So what would that look like if I was going to be investing 100,000? What do you typically, on a modest size, look at giving an investor as a return?
Yeah. So no guarantees and every deal is different, right? So we don't create
Sure.
funds. We create individual deals by so each property we buy or a portfolio we buy is one deal that people invest in, right?
Right.
And we always try to underwrite to 15% IRR, with a 6 to 8% cash on cash, right? With
Yeah.
a 5 to 7 to 10 year hold time. That's always what we underwrite to. Have our projections met our expectations? Not at all, right? Some deals have been incredibly lucrative. We had one deal that was 350% return in like a 3 year hold time, right?
That's amazing.
That's the unicorn. We've had
Yeah.
other deals that has been, yeah, kind of middle of the road at what we
Sure.
projected, and then we have some that has underperformed, right? That's the nature of the
Yeah.
business, right? Because you try. I mean, I have one deal, there's some townhomes we bought, I think 4 years ago. We were paid 8% every single year. We never missed a payment on that, right?
Yeah.
And then we've had some others that has not gone quite as well and some that's gone better. So I think that's important to understand as an investor. If you're going to get into this as an investor, don't just invest in one deal, right? Because if that deal doesn't go as well as you expected, you could say, well, real estate investing sucks. Or if you get into the really unicorn one, it's amazing. But you got to spread your risk a little bit there. Now, I know
Yeah.
that's, people don't have $1 million lying around to invest, but try to get into a handful of deals so that you are not dependent on one specific property in one
Yeah.
specific market
That
doing
way it
really
kind of
well,
levels off.
levels out, right? Now that's why if you invest in REITs, they typically buy a bunch of stuff, right? So that's a different approach. Obviously, we do it. We try to eliminate all those layers so that you're investing directly with the people that's operating it, right? So that's the LP side. What does it look like for me as a general partner, as a GP? Well, this is a business and I got to put food on the table, right? So I have to make money too. So the ways we make money is through an acquisition fee, right? So when we close the property, we may get 1, 2, 3% of the purchase price as an acquisition fee that we split among the partners in that deal, right?
Do you have partners, general partners that you work with regularly?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I have not. I mean, the smallest deal I've done has been with 2 partners. The
Okay.
biggest have been, with 5, 7, 10 partners, right? I've never done a
So you're
deal.
talking 5 to 7 general partners, and then you've got limited partners after that. That's
That's
a pretty
correct.
big deal.
Yeah, but let's imagine this is a $20 million deal, right? You got to
Yeah.
raise 5, $6 million and all stuff. Like that takes a lot of effort, right?
I
So
was about to say that sounds like you've got to do a lot of legwork and research, especially, and probably jumping through hoops to get to pull that off. So, I mean, that the risk is worth the reward, I guess, in that. So, what would you consider, like, what metrics are you most focused on with open doors and like getting new limited partners, or, are you more focused on, like, in New Mexico, what buildings are looking great? I'm sure it's probably a mixture of both. What does that look like?
yeah, so we definitely scaled back on the aggressive growth we had in the early 2020, 2021 and stuff, just because of how the market has changed from interest
Yeah.
rates and stuff, right? Because at that point you could buy anything because there's so much money floating around. It's so easy to buy something. That doesn't mean that they all going to work out. So now we are, we're selling some properties. We've sold, I think, three this year to start deleveraging some areas where, we don't really like the long-term outlook. So we've sold some stuff. And then, what I'm focusing on is, as I said, the industrial space, because how the apartment market has been more challenging. The industrial space is it's actually a lot easier to maybe manage. You have fewer tenants, and this is a different avenue. So we're on a contract right now to do actually a project here in Santa Fe, in New Mexico, our first project, which is going to be an interesting what do you call it, conversion of a warehouse to some new use and stuff like that, right? And I get it
So
because
you're
I'm
talking
10
about
years into
mixed
my
use?
journey.
You're
Sorry.
talking about mixed use buildings, like adaptive use type where
Yeah, so when I say mixed use in this case is so Santa Fe is known for its art scene, for
yeah,
them,
yeah, yeah.
a lot of artists here, it's a fantastic place. But if you're a smaller artist, it's hard to find space if you want to, do like
Studios.
sculptures or steel construction. So this owner, he's an artist himself, so he's vacating the property, and we're going to create like a community of artists to come in,
Wow.
for people that are, doing welding and cutting and stuff.
That
We're gonna
sounds
put
really
people.
cool.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So that excites me today because, Justin, I don't need to go and buy a bunch of additional real estate. I have a portfolio. I'm doing my coaching and consulting, so I'm doing projects that are interesting to me and that fires me up, right? Versus just doing another deal, right?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So like I mean it sounds great. Sounds like everything's moving in the right direction. You guys have a really good thing going on at Open Doors. So what's like if you were to say the most frustrating part of the business or in the industry that you're in, what would that look like?
It's just been the headwinds that we've had lately, right? Interest rates, insurance has just been an absolute nightmare how much they have gone up. I mean, I think our latest renewal on one property was like 34% increase in insurance from last
Yeah.
year to this year, right? That's a tough because suddenly it's like, wait a minute, right? We can't go to our tenants and say, sorry, you got to increase your rent is going to go up by 34% because I mean, that's,
Yeah.
because there's like that disconnect between expenses rising quicker than income. So that causes challenges. And ultimately, that may reduce our returns. And so those have been the biggest challenges, right? And I think right now, there's so much construction that came up in the last few years. So in many markets, there's an oversupply and so on, right? So I think for anybody who wants to go into this, I mean, if you want to buy your own, duplex or quad, by all means, go and do it. If you want to do what I'm doing, that's a business. You can't just do that in your free time or on the weekends. You got to get into it and you got to operate that as a business and, put your systems in place, put your partners in place, have asset management meetings and all these different things, right? Because you're managing a lot of properties, a lot of money, a lot of tenants and partners and all that stuff, right?
I
So
mean, you're in it for the long haul. So once take down a building and you guys have tenants and a stream of revenue coming in and you've got to disperse that out to your limited partners and so on, you're pretty much locked into, kind of overseeing that. I guess you'd call it a project for X amount of years, 10 years or whatever the, maturity date of that, projected project is going to last. So, when that comes to fruition, you're kind of looking at what's next, what's coming down the pike. You did mention new construction, but you guys aren't interested in new construction in that, in that realm. You're looking at more like multi-use adaptive buildings where you can kind of be a part of like the artist studios that you mentioned. That sounds really exciting.
yeah, I mean, so once we sell a project, right, we give the money back to the investors and their profits and so on, right? So that's that. Then we decide, right, do we want to do another project? We've done a few where we basically sold one and buying another one and roll some proceeds into the next one, right? But it's project by project, right? And I'll tell you, the appetite right now for investing in real estate is not nearly as high as it was a few years ago, although it's actually probably a better time to buy now if you can get some better values and so on, right? So, but again, I'm more because of what I've already have done in the last 10 years, I'm more interested in, as I said, something that's interesting, something that really fires me up, right? I do love doing like joint ventures, smaller deals on joint ventures, because they can be more profitable because of the economics and stuff like that, on not having to raise a bunch of money and stuff like that. So there's different avenues, right? And one of the key things I do as I started learning this business here over the last 10 years, I realized there's a lot of people that want to get into it, but they all think it's a math problem. They all think, okay, I just need to find the right deal and underwrite it and then buy it. But there's so many nuances that most people don't think about. So I started, roughly, 7, 8 years ago, I started mentoring newer investors because, I had learning it and I knew what it took to take down property. So I started mentoring people, and not so much just on the underwriting and putting the deal together. Also, what is the mindset you need to have to be an investor, right? How do you go from, being a W-2 employee to run your own business, mindsets and everything else? Because that has really, I feel like the way I became successful was through, understanding the underwriting and everything else, but also getting around the right people to help me push in the right direction, right? So that has been an addition to my real estate business, is mentoring investors, and then it's gone on to executive coaching and leadership and business consulting, because that really is interesting to me, and I have a lot of experience through my business plus doing all these deals and so on, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can see how you've got a wealth of experience to share that would probably give somebody else the insight and encouragement to take that next leap in their life, is if they were looking to venture into something that looks like uncharted territory to them, but you've kind of navigated your way through finding out what works, what doesn't work. If there was a magic wand, I mean, it sounds like you can. I mean, if I were you, I'd be thinking, well, what is my retirement? Because I'd be like, well, I've pretty much it doesn't sound like you've reached a pinnacle, but it kind of does. I mean, it does kind of sound like you've climbed to the top of the mountain. I mean, and you're kind of in this place where you kind of get to pick and choose. I mean, I myself as a business owner, I've been through the peaks and valleys, if you will. And, what looks like a valley today used to be a peak 10 years ago. It's kind of like, well, there's always the next great thing that my eyes are set on. And so if you were to have a magic wand to make, open doors, capital be like this next big, great, perfect scenario, what would that look like? Like in the next six to
Yeah, I
12?
think, Justin, I mean, we as entrepreneurs and stuff, I mean, the idea of quote unquote retirement sounds like torture to me, right? What would I do all day if I didn't have something meaningful to put
I'll
my
tell you what
energy
I would
into? I
do.
know
I would
you
go
are in,
skiing.
and I know you were in Lake Tahoe last week. Hopefully you were there skiing, right? So I try to create a balance, right?
I was.
I try
Yeah.
to find, boundaries, and I try to do, travel and trips. I'm going to Italy in March to do a bicycling event because that's my big hobby. So I try to find a balance between
You're a
working
cyclist.
and then also doing other things, right? So it's more about service now. It's more about impact to others, right? Helping, somebody like yourself to grow his business to the next level, or
Mhm.
newer investor or somebody to really take it to that next level. Because if I can help people get more joy and more success in their business and less stress and all these different things, that's what really brings me joy right now, right? So what's
So
next for me? I'll be slowly, still investing in real estate, but I'm not like I gotta add another 2,000 units. No, I kind of want to scale down, and because now I know what profitable deals versus not so profitable deals look like. And
So that's interesting. You mentioned, you like mentoring and being of service to other people. That's a really cool thing. It sounds like you're more prone and uh compelled to give back what you've achieved or maintained and I guess discovered along the way with the knowledge that you've acquired. I mean, that's interesting because um you know I I like that, and I've always felt like that's, something that I see a lot of. I mean, I see a lot of, I have another company that I've owned for 20 years, and I've had business coaches on how to run the contracting business, and that's been extremely helpful. So, I mean, it was almost like I found oxygen for the first time when I got encouraged to take some leaps in my company that I was scared to take for a long time. And I needed that push, that encouragement to do what I knew was necessary, but just trying to relinquish control, finding those people. And, as far as, your business coaching, I guess, is that what you would say you're more passionate about now?
Yeah, so, I still love real estate, right? But real estate is kind of the long-term wealth building, right? And I don't want to be so dependent on, is it cash flowing well this year or not so much to impact my, putting food on the table and pay the bills. So the coaching, so business coaching is one, right? I'm also a certified high performance coach where I help people really with their mindset, right? Somebody that wants to grow personally to that next level. That could be, an employee who is like, man, I'm tired of my job. I want to start my own business, or just somebody that feels stuck and they don't really know how to get unstuck, right? So those things are just incredibly valuable to me. I work with a high performing real estate agent here in town, and I spoke to her last week and said, oh my God, I'm so stressed and this is too much pressure and all these different things. And within one conversation, she completely changed her attitude and mindset around what work meant to her and retirement and everything else. And that's incredibly rewarding, right? Yeah, it's earned income, right? I am exchanging my time for money, but still incredibly rewarding to help people live a more fulfilling life, a more impactful life. And that's
Yeah,
that's where my energy, again, real estate investing doesn't take all day for me. I got to do something else, right? And my wife goes
sure.
off to work, so I got to have something to do, right?
So how do people find you? I know you mentioned that realtor in town. I'm sure maybe it's a big town. I'm not sure. I've actually never been to New Mexico, but how do people find you? I noticed I did get a couple of your emails about the business coaching, and that piqued my interest. I was like, wow, that's a really valuable thing to be doing, because I know a lot of people, including myself, have benefited from getting that kind of mentorship, if you will. So, I mean, how do people find you? I mean, I know you've got a website and everything like that, but in general, like, it's like a needle in a haystack. There's a lot of people out there. So what do you do for that? How, like, do you advertise, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's a little bit like getting investors, right, for our deals. It's a lot of personal connections, right? I don't advertise. I don't have a billboard anywhere. It's all about meeting people and sharing what I do and seeing if there is a connection there, right? So I run a meetup here in town. I ask for referrals. I get on podcasts and stuff like this. It's just a lot about how I'm slowly meeting. Because again, I don't need 1,000 clients, right? I need a handful of clients that are ready and willing to change their life or change their
So,
business.
like, how many clients are you working with currently right now?
It varies because I do some one-on-one coaching, some group coaching, some business coaching. So I probably have anywhere from, in a given month, I may touch 25 people, from either group session or one-on-one or business stuff, right? 20, so it varies, there's some clients I've been with for years and some are, just show up for a while and so on, right? It's not like
And
I have
typically,
25 calls a week, right? I have a handful of calls every week, but then
sure.
throughout the month, I touch multiple people.
So, I mean, is that you're just kind of keeping it at that level because that's kind of like you want the free time to cycle and do other things and be able to do that, or is that something that you're trying to grow, or is that
So yes, I don't want to have, I can't serve somebody if I have 40 calls a week, right? I'm going to be completely burned out. So I try to keep it at a reasonable, 2 or 3 calls a day max to keep it
yeah,
reasonable. My Fridays is my day off, whatever. So am I trying to grow it? Well, I mean, clients always roll off, new clients come in. So I'm always like out there, creating clients, if you will, right?
yeah.
So maybe somebody signs up tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, but I'm always trying to connect with people in that way. What I'm trying to grow, Justin, though, is the quality. That's the hard of it. I'm trying to work with the people that are really ready for change. Because I've had some clients in the past that are like, yeah, I want to change, but they weren't ready. And I'm like wasting my time and their time. So now I'm like, I spend a lot of time getting to know the potential clients and make sure that they're actually ready
That's
they're
interesting.
committed and ready.
How do you determine, you had a magic wand. How do you determine who's ready and who's not?
Well, they've already done something, right? If I look at somebody and they've been in a W-2 job for 20 years and they're like, well, I really want to start my own business. They haven't done anything and they're just talking about it. It's like, you may not be ready, right? But if somebody like, yourself who has run a business but may be ready for the next level or something, it's like, yeah, well, Justin's already done some work. He's probably ready. He can probably move to that next level, right? So there's a there's a
Have to
there's a
use some
there's a
sort of a filter.
process.
Yeah, you got to use some sort of a filter of, kind of vetting people to come to the table because I can imagine you probably do speak to some quote unquote tire kickers who are just like entertaining the idea of wanting to take the next step, but not quite ready, like you said. So that's interesting you say that. So, I'm going to wrap things up here, Jens, because this has been a pleasure. And I know you've got, other things to do, and I've got to get ready to get on my next flight here. But I really appreciate you being patient with me and taking the time out to meet me, even while I'm in the airport. But it's interesting you mentioned some things because I mean that's what my current business that we're in. I'm doing the podcast to get people, to see what other businesses are doing. And I try to partner and help other businesses that are looking to either find new clients. And, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compile our podcast conversation and I'm going to send over a summary. It's an AI generated summary of our conversation. And I'd like to, touch base next week after everything settles down, like for 20 minutes. What's a good time? I know you got a lot of business calls coming in, but typically your free moment to take 20 minutes to recap the conversation before I actually post the podcast in case you
Yeah,
want
why
to
don't
do
I
any.
send you my booking link so you can schedule some time on my calendar?
Please
That's
do.
probably
That
the
would be
best.
great. Why don't
That,
you do that? And then we'll circle back next week. Okay.
that sound good.
Awesome.
Sounds good, Justin.
Jens, thank you very much. Open Doors Capital has been a fantastic journey. I really enjoyed listening to everything you had to share. And, I'm almost ready to take the plunge into multi-unit, but you almost scared me into wanting to go in a different direction because maybe I need to rethink that idea. All right. Well, listen, thanks again, Jens. I appreciate it. We'll talk next week.
Likewise. Yep.
All right. Bye-bye.